She promised them wealth beyond imagination. She promised them power. But the beautiful woman of the lagoon never mentioned the price, their souls. And by the time they saw what lived beneath her beauty, it was already too late. Kwame sat by the fire in the village square, his withered hands shaking as he spoke. The other fishermen of Volta leaned in close, their faces lit by dancing flames. He had returned from the Black Lagoon 3 days ago, and he had not stopped trembling since his boat was full of the finest fish anyone had ever seen. But his eyes were empty, haunted. "She is real," Kwame whispered, his voice cracking. "The woman in the water. I saw her with my own eyes. Beautiful beyond words, rising from the lagoon like morning mist. She called my name. Though I never told her, she knew things about me that no one should know." The other men exchanged nervous glances, remembering the old stories their grandmothers told Kwabena, the youngest fisherman, laughed nervously. "You've been out in the sun too long, old man. There's no woman in that cursed lagoon, just deep water and hungry crocodiles." But even as he spoke, his hand touched the charm around his neck, the one his mother made him promise to always wear. Deep down, everyone in the Volta region knew the Black Lagoon was different. Something lived there, something that wore beauty like a mask. Kwabena couldn't sleep that night. He lay in his small hut, staring at the thatched ceiling, thinking about Kwame's boat full of fish. The old man had caught more in one day than Kwabena caught in a month. His wife, Abena, slept beside him, pregnant with their first child. They needed money. The baby would come soon, and they had nothing. Before dawn, Kwabena made his decision. He would go to the Black Lagoon. If there was a woman there, spirit or not, and she could bring fortune, he would risk it. He was young, strong, smart. He could handle whatever tricks she had. The old men were just afraid of their own shadows. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Abena, and gathered his fishing nets. The walk to the Black Lagoon took 2 hours through dense forest. The closer he got, the quieter the jungle became. No birds sang, no monkeys chattered in the trees. Even the insects seemed to hold their breath. When Kwabena finally emerged from the tree line, he saw it, a perfectly round lagoon. Its water so dark it looked like a pool of midnight mist clung to the surface, and the air smelled of flowers and rot mixed together. Something about it made his skin crawl, but he pushed the feeling down. Fortune favored the brave. Kwabena cast his nets into the dark water and waited. The sun climbed higher, but the lagoon remained cold, the mist never burning away. Hours passed. Nothing. No fish, no movement. Nothing but the eerie stillness. He was about to give up when he heard it, singing. A woman's voice, beautiful and strange, coming from somewhere across the lagoon. He stood up in his canoe, searching for the source. The mist swirled and parted, and then he saw her. A woman stood waist deep in the water, maybe 50 meters away. Even from that distance, he could see she was the most beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on. Her skin glowed like polished mahogany. Her hair fell in thick waves past her shoulders. She wore jewelry that sparkled even in the dim lagoon light. Gold, silver, gems he couldn't name. She smiled at him, and his heart stopped. "Kwabena," she called, her voice like honey and music. "I've been waiting for you." He wanted to ask how she knew his name, wanted to ask who she was, but words died in his throat. She beckoned with one slender finger, and without thinking, he found himself paddling toward her. The charm around his neck grew hot against his skin, burning, warning him, but he couldn't stop. He had to get closer. When Kwabena's canoe reached her, the woman placed her hands on the side of his boat. Her touch was cold, unnaturally so, like touching water from a deep well. Up close, she was even more beautiful, and something about her beauty was wrong. Too perfect, like looking at a painting instead of a person. Her eyes were the color of deep water, shifting between blue and green and black. "You won't wait," she said softly. It wasn't a question. You want to provide for your wife, for the child coming. You want the other fishermen to respect you instead of mock you. Every word was true, and hearing them from her lips made Kwabena feel naked, exposed. How did she know these things? How did she see into his heart? "I can give you everything you desire," she continued, her smile widening just a fraction too much. "Fish will fill your nets until they nearly break. Your family will never go hungry. The village will speak your name with honor." Her hand moved from the boat to his hand, and where she touched, his skin went numb with cold. "All I ask in return is a small favor. When I call you, you will come back to me. Just once, that's all. One visit whenever I need you. Do we have a deal?" Kwabena should have asked what the favor was, should have asked what she needed, but he was already nodding, already saying yes, already doomed. The change was immediate. The moment Kwabena agreed, his nets suddenly grew heavy. He pulled them up to find them bursting with fish. Huge, beautiful specimens that would fetch top price at the market. The woman smiled and slowly sank back into the dark water, disappearing beneath the surface without a ripple. Kwabena's hands trembled as he paddled back to shore, his canoe riding low with the weight of his catch. When he returned to the village, people gathered around in amazement. Never had anyone seen such fish, such quantity, such quality. Kwabena sold them all before sunset and returned home with more money than he'd made in 6 months. Abena cried with joy and relief. That night, they ate well, and for the first time in weeks, Kwabena allowed himself to believe everything would be alright. But when he lay down to sleep, he felt the charm around his neck, the one his mother gave him, crack. A thin line split down his center. In his dreams, he heard singing, the woman's voice, calling from deep water. And in the dream, he saw what lived beneath her beautiful face. Scales, teeth, eyes that glowed in the darkness. He woke up screaming, but by morning, he convinced himself it was just a nightmare. Just his mind playing tricks. The money was real. The fish were real. That was all that mattered. Over the next month, 3 more young men from the village made the journey to the Black Lagoon. Word spread about Kwabena's fortune, and despite the warnings from elders, greed proved stronger than fear. Each man returned the same way, canoes overflowing with fish, pockets heavy with coins, and eyes that looked slightly wrong. Haunted, empty, Kofi was the second, then Yo, then Mensa. All young men with families, with debts, with desperation. All of them met the beautiful woman in the lagoon. All of them made the same deal, and all of them prospered immediately. The village had never seen such abundance. Fish flooded the market. Families that had struggled for years suddenly had money for medicine, for clothes, for celebrations. But the village elders noticed something else. The 4 men who had visited the lagoon began to change. They grew quieter, more withdrawn. They stopped attending church. They would stand for hours staring in the direction of the lagoon, as if listening to something no one else could hear. And at night, people reported seeing them walking toward the forest in their sleep, only to wake up at the forest edge with no memory of how they got there. Something was calling them back. Something was hungry. Abena, watched her husband change. Kwabena was providing well. They had more money than ever before, but he was disappearing in other ways. He barely spoke anymore. He didn't smile. He would wake up screaming from nightmares he refused to describe. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she saw him staring at his reflection in water, his face twisted with something between longing and horror. One night, she found him standing outside their hut at midnight, fully dressed, staring toward the forest. "Kwabena," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. He didn't respond. His eyes were open but unseeing, and his lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear. She shook him harder, and suddenly he gasped, blinking, confused about how he got outside. "What's happening to you?" Abena demanded, tears streaming down her face. "Tell me the truth. What did you do at that lagoon?" Kwabena opened his mouth to lie, to say nothing was wrong, but something in his wife's eyes broke through his denial. He told her everything: the woman, the deal, the favor he promised. When he finished, Abena's face went pale. "You fool," she whispered. "Don't you know the stories? That's Mami Wata, the water spirit. She doesn't give gifts, she takes. And when she calls you back, you won't return." But it was too late for warnings. The deal was made. The debt would be collected. 2 months after Kwabena's first visit, the calling began. It started as a whisper in his mind. A woman's voice, soft and insistent, speaking words he couldn't quite understand. Then it grew louder, more demanding. He would hear it while fishing, while eating, while lying with his wife. Always the same voice, always calling his name, always pulling at something deep in his chest. The other 3 men felt it too. Kofi stopped sleeping entirely, his eyes red and wild. Yo began walking to the forest edge every night, fighting against invisible chains that pulled him forward. Mensa covered his ears constantly, trying to block out a sound only he could hear. The village watched in growing horror as the 4 young men slowly came apart at the seams. Then, one night, under a new moon, when the darkness was absolute, the calling reached its peak. All 4 men stood up from their beds simultaneously, their movements perfectly synchronized. Their wives tried to hold them back, but it was like trying to stop the tide. The men walked toward the forest with steady, purposeful steps, their eyes glassy and distant. By the time the village realized what was happening, all 4 had disappeared into the darkness, heading toward the Black Lagoon. And in the distance, if you listened carefully, you could hear singing, beautiful, terrible singing. At dawn, when the 4 men had not returned, the village erupted in panic. Abena, now heavily pregnant, organized a search party. 20 men, led by the village chief, prepared to go to the Black Lagoon. The elders tried to stop them, warning that interfering with Mami Wata's business meant death. But the families of the missing men wouldn't listen. They had to try. The search party armed themselves with machetes, ropes, and charms blessed by the village priest. They moved through the forest in a tight group, nobody willing to stray from the others. The usual forest sounds were absent. No birds, no animals, just an unnatural silence that pressed against their ears. As they approached the lagoon, a thick fog rolled in, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. They emerged at the lagoon's edge and stopped dead. The 4 missing men stood waist deep in the water, perfectly still, their backs to the shore. They didn't move, didn't respond when their names were called. And there, swimming in slow circles around them, was the woman. Even in daylight, she was impossibly beautiful. But now, in the morning light, The search party could see what the mist had hidden before. Her lower body, beneath the water surface, was wrong, scaled, moving in ways that weren't human. She smiled at the men on shore, and her teeth were just slightly too sharp. Among the search party was Father Akwasi, the village priest. He had been ordained in both the Christian church and the old ways, carrying knowledge from both worlds. When he saw the water spirit and the entranced men, he knew immediately what they faced. This was no mere Mami Wata. This was something older, something that had made a bargain with darker powers. Father Akwasi stepped forward, pulling out a small leather pouch filled with sacred herbs and blessed salt. He began chanting in the old language, words his grandmother taught him, words that predated the missionaries. The woman in the water stopped circling and turned her full attention to him. Her smile faded, and for a moment, something ancient and cruel flashed across her face. "You cannot have them," Father Akwasi declared, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "They were deceived. The bargain is void." The woman laughed, a sound like water over rocks. "Deceived? They came willingly. They took my gifts willingly. And now they will pay willingly. The debt must be satisfied. Priest, I have my own debts to pay to those who dwell in the deep places, and I will not face that darkness alone." If this tale has gripped your soul, show JourneyTales Africa some love. Hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss the dark stories hidden beneath Africa's waters. Now, let's discover what bargain the Siren made and what awaits in the deep. Father Akwasi's blood ran cold. "What have you done?" he asked. "What death could drive a spirit to harvest souls?" The woman's beautiful face flickered, and for just a moment, the search party saw her true form. Scales, fins, teeth like daggers. Then the illusion snapped back, and she was beautiful again. But now everyone could see it was just a mask. "I was young once," she said, her voice losing its sweetness, becoming tired, desperate. "Centuries ago, I fell in love with a human man. I wanted to leave the water, to walk on land, to be with him. So I made a deal with something from the deepest part of the ocean. Something that has no name, only hunger. It gave me legs, gave me the power to move between worlds. But nothing is free. Every year, I must bring it souls, 5 souls, or I become food for its endless appetite." Yes. The men on shore stood frozen, understanding dawning. This wasn't just cruelty. This was survival. The woman was as trapped as they were, caught in a cycle of horror that had lasted hundreds of years. "How many?" Father Akwasi asked quietly. "How many souls have you collected?" The woman's eyes filled with something that might have been tears, or might have been water from her domain. "Too many to count, too many to remember, and I am so tired." For a long moment, nobody spoke. The 4 entranced men stood motionless in the water. The woman floated among them, a beautiful mask barely holding. The search party gripped their weapons tighter, unsure what to do. Fight a spirit who was also a victim. Let their loved ones be taken to save a creature they didn't know. "There must be another way," Father Akwasi said. "Break your bargain. Face whatever made this deal with you. Perhaps together." But the woman cut him off with bitter laughter. "You don't understand. The thing I made my deal with, it doesn't negotiate. It doesn't forgive. It simply consumes. If I fail to deliver, it will rise from the deep and take not just me, but everyone within 10 miles of this lagoon. Your village, your families, your children, all of you will feed its hunger." Abena, who had insisted on joining the search despite her pregnancy, stepped forward. "Then we give you a different choice," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "Take me instead. I'll go willingly. Just let the men go. Let my husband come home to raise our child." The woman stared at her, and something like respect crossed her face. But she shook her head. The deal requires specific souls. Those who came willingly, seeking wealth, touched by greed. The innocent cannot satisfy the dead. I'm sorry. Something in Abena's voice, in her willingness to sacrifice herself, broke through the fog in Kwabena's mind. He blinked, awareness flooding back, and looked around in confusion. He was standing in water up to his waist. The beautiful woman floated nearby. His wife stood on shore, tears streaming down her face. What was happening? Then memory came crashing back. The deal, the favor, the calling. He understood now. He was going to die. Not just die. His soul would be fed to something in the deep, something hungry and eternal. And it was his own fault. His greed, his pride, his refusal to listen to warnings. He had traded everything for a few months of prosperity. "Abena," he called out, his voice his own again. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You are right about everything." His wife sobbed harder. Reaching out toward him, the other three men began to wake as well, realization and horror dawning on their faces. They looked at each other, at the woman, at their families on shore, and they understood. There was no escape. The debt would be paid. The only question was when. "How long?" Kofi asked the woman. "How long do we have?" The woman's face showed genuine sadness. 3 days. "When the moon is full, I must take you to the deep place and present you to the one who owns my debt. After that," she didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what came after. Darkness, consumption, whatever existed beyond death but worse, because their souls would never rest. They would simply feed something's hunger forever. "Unless," the woman said quietly, "you help me find another way." Everyone looked at her in surprise. Father Akwasi stepped closer to the water's edge. "What do you mean?" The woman's mask of beauty slipped entirely, revealing her true form. A creature that was half woman, half deep-sea horror, covered in scales that shimmered like oil, with eyes that reflected no light. "I've carried this curse for 300 years, she said, her voice becoming more human in its pain, more real. "I've fed that thing in the depths, more souls than I can count. I've forgotten my real name, forgotten my real face. If there's a way to break this, if there's a way to face that thing and survive, I want to try, but I cannot do it alone. No single being can face what lives down there and live." She looked at the 4 men in the water, at the search party on shore. "Help me end this, for all of us." Father Akwasi called an emergency council in the village that night. The 4 men, released from the water but marked for death in 3 days, sat in the center. The woman, she finally told them her name was Efua, though that had been her name centuries ago, could not leave the lagoon, but sent her voice through a bowl of water Father Akwasi had blessed. The thing in the deep is called the Devourer. Efua's voice rippled from the water. It's older than human memory, older than the spirits themselves. It feeds on souls, growing stronger with each one. But it has a weakness. It made its lair in the deepest part of the Black Lagoon, in underwater caves. There, it's most vulnerable. If someone could reach it before the full moon, before it expects the offering, they might be able to destroy it. And how do we destroy something that feeds on souls? The village chief asked. Father Akwasi was already flipping through his oldest books, texts passed down from generations of priests. Fire, he said finally. Not normal fire, but the eternal flame. The fire that purifies, that existed before creation. We'd need to bring it into the deep water, which should be impossible, but... I can carry it, Efua's voice interrupted. I can protect the flame in the deep. But someone must come with me. Someone living, someone willing, someone pure of heart. The Devourer can only be killed by a living soul, choosing sacrifice willingly, not taken by force or deception. Everyone looked at each other. Who would volunteer to dive into the darkest depths with a water spirit to face an ancient evil? Who would willingly walk into death with no guarantee of return? I'll go. The voice was female, young and determined. Everyone turned to see Ama, Kwabena's younger sister, standing in the doorway. She was only 17, unmarried, with her whole life ahead of her. Kwabena immediately shook his head. No, absolutely not. I made this mistake. I'll fix it. But Ama walked forward, her small frame somehow radiating strength. You have a wife and a child coming, she said simply. Kofi has 3 children. Yor supports his elderly parents. Mensa just got married. You all have people who need you. She turned to Father Akwasi. I choose this. Willingly. With a pure heart. That's what it requires, right? The priest looked at her with profound sadness and respect. Yes. But child, you don't know what you're facing. I know exactly what I'm facing, Ama replied. Death, probably. Horror, certainly. But if I don't do this, my brother dies, and that thing keeps taking souls forever. Someone has to break the cycle. It might as well be me. Her voice didn't waver. At 17, she had made peace with her death before the rest of them had even processed what she was offering. Abena began to cry. Kwabena fell to his knees, and in the bowl of water, Efua's voice whispered, You are braver than I ever was. They had 2 days to prepare. Father Akwasi worked day and night to create the eternal flame, a fire blessed by every priest, elder, and spiritual leader within 100 miles. It burned in a special torch that could be sealed in a waterproof container made of blessed metal and sacred wood. The entire village contributed. Prayers, charms, blessings, anything that might protect Ama in the deep. Ama spent those 2 days saying goodbye to people without telling them it was goodbye. She helped her mother cook. She played with the village children. She sat with Abena and felt the baby cake inside her belly. She lived 2 days more fully than most people live entire lifetimes, drinking in every moment, every sensation, every smile, because she knew they would be her last. On the final night, Kwabena tried one more time to change her mind. Please, he begged. Let me go instead. I deserve this fate, not you. Ama took her brother's hands and smiled. You deserve to live. You made a mistake, yes, but you don't deserve eternal torment. Besides, someone needs to remember my story. Someone needs to tell future generations about the day we broke the curse of the Black Lagoon. That's your job now. Live well, brother. Live for both of us. At dawn on the 3rd day, Ama walked into the Black Lagoon. She wore simple white cloth, carried the sealed eternal flame, and had so many protective charms around her neck they weighed her down like stones. The entire village stood on the shore, singing prayers, watching their youngest hero walk toward death. Efua rose from the water in her true form, no longer hiding behind beauty. Are you ready? The spirit asked. Ama nodded. I've been ready since I was born for this. I just didn't know it until now. Efua took Ama's hand, scales touching skin, and together they dove. The water of the Black Lagoon was cold, dark, endless. Efua's body glowed faintly, providing the only light. They swam down, down, down into depths that shouldn't exist in any lagoon. The walls became rock. Then they entered caves. Then the caves became tunnels that twisted into the earth itself. Ama's lungs should have burst, but Efua's magic kept her alive, kept her breathing water like air. They passed the bones of hundreds, maybe thousands, of souls who had been brought here before. And then, finally, they reached a massive cavern at the bottom of everything. And there, in the darkness, something vast stirred. The Devourer had been waiting. It had no shape that made sense. One moment, it looked like a massive fish with too many teeth. The next, like a squid with eyes that burned. Then, like darkness itself given hungry consciousness. Ama couldn't look directly at it without her mind starting to break. So she kept her eyes on the eternal flame in her hands. The container was warm, the fire inside burning bright even in the crushing deep. "You brought me a gift," the Devourer's voice rumbled through the water, through their bones, through their souls. "But you come early, Efua. The moon is not yet full. And this soul, it reeks of choice, of willing sacrifice. That is not our bargain." Efua floated forward, her voice strong for the first time in 300 years. "I am ending our bargain. This soul is not for you. This flame is." She nodded to Ama, who understood. Together, they opened the container. The eternal flame burst out, and impossibly, it burned in the water. It burned brighter than the sun, hotter than any earthly fire, with light that was there before the world began. The Devourer screamed, a sound that cracked the rock walls, that sent tremors through the earth above, that made every living thing in the Volta region shudder with primal fear. The eternal flame touched the Devourer, and the ancient thing began to burn. Not with heat, but with purification, with ending. It thrashed and screamed, and Efua held Ama close, protecting her with her own body as the Devourer's death throes threatened to bring the entire cave system down. Rocks fell. Water churned. The darkness itself seemed to scream. But the flame could not be stopped. It consumed the Devourer completely, burning away centuries of accumulated evil, thousands of trapped souls, suddenly released in a burst of light that shot up through the water and exploded from the Black Lagoon like a geyser. The village, watching from the shore, saw spirits rising, men and women from hundreds of years, finally free, finally at peace, ascending into the sky and disappearing. When the water settled, when the cave stopped shaking, when the eternal flame finally burned out, Efua and Ama floated in the darkness, both exhausted, both alive. "You did it," Efua whispered. "We did it." They swam up together, through the caves, through the dark water, toward light. When they broke the surface, the entire village erupted in cheers. The Black Lagoon was no longer black. It was clear, pure, reflecting the morning sky like a mirror. The curse was broken, the debt was paid, and against all odds, Ama had come home. Today, the lagoon near the Volta region is called Clearwater. Children swim there, fish thrive in its depths, and sometimes, on quiet mornings, people report seeing a beautiful woman swimming in the center. But now, she's just swimming. Free. No longer hunting. No longer cursed. Ama lived to be 93 years old and told her story to anyone who would listen. And Efua? Some say she still lives in those waters. Guardian, now instead of predator. Protecting instead of hunting, the debt was broken. The darkness was defeated. And it only took one brave girl who chose sacrifice over safety. This is JourneyTales Africa. Not all spirits are evil. Not all monsters are what they seem. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk into darkness, holding a light. Subscribe to hear more tales from the waters, the forests, and the shadows of Africa.